You've been on a looping coaster before, probably dozens of them, from B&Ms to Intamins to launches to floorless to wing to spinning and everything in between. 2025, going upside down is just part of the experience. But none of those rides would exist without one. Because in 1975 at Knott's Berry Farm in California, a small, unassuming steel coaster flipped the entire industry upside down. No pun intended. Corkscrew didn't just add a new thrill, it revived inversions entirely, which had been stagnant for 60 years. Every modern looping coaster, from the Batman clones to Velocicoaster, can trace its DNA back to this one moment in coaster history. Today we're going to take a deep dive while recreating the ride that started it all. Hello everyone, welcome back to TH Designs. Today we're doing another recreation coming hot off of Wild One from Six Flags America. And today we're doing another historic coaster, arguably the most historic coaster ever built. And of course there's a lot of contenders for that title, but Corkscrew at Knott's Berry Farm in California is probably a fair bet for being one of the most inspirational and iconic coasters of all time. As I said, it opened in Knott's Berry Farm, and it opened in 1975. It was about 60 years after we saw the looping coasters, the wooden looping coasters of the early 1900s and the late 1800s. I actually have a video talking about those and the first ever looping coaster on this channel. This is about 60 years after that, where looping and going upside down and inverting was kind of forgotten about because it was viewed as unsafe. And pretty reasonably so. If you watched that video, you would see exactly why it was considered unsafe. But this was the return of going upside down, and it was one of the first ones to have over-the-shoulder restraints. The two corkscrews were, of course, the elements that were the first. This coaster inspired a generation of new coasters and new manufacturers and new types of coasters. Just the year after, you had Schwarzkopf making Revolution at Six Flags Magic Mountain, which was the first vertical looping coaster. And that in itself is still going and still pretty iconic. Now, this coaster only operated for 14 years at Knott's Berry Farm. If you don't know, Knott's Berry Farm is a very tight piece of land in California. The park is always reaching for more space because it doesn't have that much. So a coaster like Corkscrew, when it opened, being the first of its type of a prototype given to them by Arrow, or bought from Arrow at least, it was a big deal, but it probably fell out of favor fairly quickly. 14 years was all it lasted before it went to Silverwood in Idaho, where it still actually sits today. So this coaster has been going strong for quite some time. It is only 70 feet tall. It's only like 1,200 feet of track. I mean, you can see the layout now. The layout is obviously super short. It was groundbreaking, but it wasn't anything crazy. And actually, I think I'm about to change it soon, and I want to mention it before I do it, but the coaster is blue here, which is probably as you know Corkscrew, because almost any image that you can find of it is blue. And the coaster opened in 1975 actually completely white. And that's what I'll end up changing the color to in a few minutes, because I kind of wanted to create it as it was in 1975. The custom supports here were also pretty indicative of Arrow's designs, of Arrow's Corkscrew designs. I thought I could get away with the in-game ones, but I could not. This coaster model was carved and copied pretty much everywhere in the country, across the world, and obviously set the bar for inverted coasters of the future, which is another reason why it fell out of favor in the late 80s at Knott's Berry Farm. It actually got replaced by a Vekoma boomerang, which was kind of the next big thing at that time. I think Vekoma boomerangs are the most popular model ever made, so it didn't really stand much of a chance. But this coaster served its purpose, definitely, and it's still kicking at Silverwood today, so there's a lot of these models still around, but this was the first. Now, as for the build itself, there's almost no footage of the coaster in when it was still white. There's some footage of when it was blue, I think in the 80s, when it was at Knott's Berry Farm. So when you see me get to the scenery, especially as you'll see in the cinematic, because I'm only going to really focus on the track layout and the station build to kind of keep this video a little bit shorter, you kind of see me going out on a limb. I kind of have to. There's some photos, and I'll pop them up as this commentary goes so you can see what I was referring to. Even these supports, there wasn't that much to base it off of, so I had to use the POV at Silverwood. And actually, at the very beginning of this video, you saw me using the TV screens. Those TV screens are to make sure that top down it's completely one-to-one And that was actually of Silverwood, not Knott's Berry Farm, because Google Earth does not go as far back. Knott's Berry Farm had one that goes back to like 1988 on Google Earth, but it just was too fuzzy, so it just wasn't working. So I had to base it off of Silverwood. It's the same exact coaster, same exact layout, so you can be guaranteed that at least this layout is exactly one-to-one. So as for the Corkscrew support structures, I wanted to mention those quick. Those are not mine. I will try and find the workshop code. I've used them in the past. They are fantastic. Obviously, the Corkscrew support structure is such a complicated shape, so to have those in my inventory was very helpful, and I'll make sure to give that a little bit of a shout out. But this ride is pretty rough, as you could probably imagine with this type of model and this age. But I tried to make it relatively smooth in the recreation and not make it completely accurate. I'm sure it was probably a headache machine. I'm actually really curious how many viewers have been on this coaster when it was at Knott's Berry Farm. It was only there for 14 years, which relative to coasters is a pretty short time frame. Yeah, so I'll be really curious how many people viewing this video have actually been on the coaster, and can actually probably help me out with contextualizing where this is on the site. You'll see in the cinematic that I kind of just built placeholders. The one thing I do know is that the station has like the typical like Roller Coaster Tycoon, like kind of carnival roofing, so that's entirely accurate. That was also on the POV, as you'll see here. But yeah, this video was just made to get something out quick. This has been a very busy week for me, so this was relatively simple to make. It's obviously one of the more simple layouts out there. The hardest part about this was actually fact-checking myself with making sure everything was accurate. So even with this queue, I'm basing it off of where the coaster is going down the first hill, and you get like a glimpse at the ground. I know when this opened in the 70s, it was part of the Roaring 20s section of the park, which is kind of funny to think about because it feels like such a retro and vintage type of theme for a theme park. But it was the 70s, and even then it was still 50 years prior. It'd be like us having a 70s themed section of a park. It just seems kind of strange, but interesting. So maybe that's why you see this pretty typical carnival kind of design. When it did change to blue was pretty much right after it opened, when they made an airfield theme. I've never been to Knott's Berry Farm. I'm not from California. I'm not entirely sure of the history of Knott's Berry Farm, so I'm not sure exactly what this area looks like or even where in the park this sat. So I just tried my best to make it as accurate as it could, but I think overall it's not bad. It pretty much just like serves as a prototype, which is pretty much what it was. This coaster allowed Arrow to pretty much take off entirely. Just the year after, you had Corkscrew reopen at Cedar Point. Arrow also opened Loch Ness Monster, which was the first ever interlocking loops, I believe at least. I can't imagine there was another one, and that was in 1978, so just a few years after this. So that span leaving the 70s was really integral for the history of roller coasters, and you saw it starting with this one. With all that said, let's just cut over to the cinematic, and I hope you enjoyed this rather short video. Yeah, something charming. Maybe you hopefully learned a thing or two. Do take care, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the cinematic, and keep an eye out for new videos. Apologies for this week being a little bit dry. I've been very busy with laser cutting and all that stuff, so do take care. Thank you for watching.